Okay, so I just want to make a quick video. There's another thing that I have that I already have installed that I'm not going to pull apart just to show you how it goes in, because the instructions that come with it are pretty good. It's a P3 gauge to hook up in the car. So I pulled it out, put it in. It's a relatively easy install, but again, I'm just going to show you a couple little tips and tricks just to get it on. So here's where the gauge sits in here. You can see it goes right in there. Sits right in the vent, looks very nice, looks very good. The instructions that go with it are pretty good, but there are a couple things that don't put it on because they're specific to your car. One of them in particular is how you hook it up to the dimmer switch. The dimmer switch, once you turn on the lights, or once the lights come on automatically, is going to have the display dim a little bit so that way it's not super bright at night. It's going to be a green wire that comes off the box that's going to get tucked up underneath there, and you have to tap that into your dimmer switch. Now, to get to the dimmer switch, or to get this thing installed, the instructions say you have to take this whole big console piece out. I didn't have to do that. Again, I'm not going to pull it apart just because there's a million other videos that you can look up and you can see it there, but just a little tips. Once you take this top piece off, this top trim, it just pops right up. There's a couple bolts up here, there's a bolt, a 7mm, a 7mm down here, and there's some clips over here, and you can pull this thing forward and you can sneak it out. But once you have this thing in, I'm more or less going to tell you about how I tapped into this thing for the boost gauge and for how I tapped into it to get the dimmer switch. So to see where it goes in, to get this out, this piece is going to be the only piece that's a little tricky. Take a little trim tool and you want to go in from the top. Don't go in from the bottom because of the way that it sits. It's not going to pull out that way. So trim tool from the top, do it right there, and it'll pull right down and come right out. You don't want to do it from the bottom, as you can see it has these little tabs right here and it hooks in right here. That's why you can't do it from the bottom, you have to pry it down from the top. Now, the dimmer switch itself is not going to be either one of these two. It's going to be up here. The switch itself is going to plug into this switch. So if you see it, it's going to go right there. Right up in here, there's going to be that switch right there, okay? Now, in order to get that out, it is a little bit of a pain once you already have all this stuff installed. If you have all this installed, you can get it out. I was able to get it out with this and be able to fish it in and out. But once you have all this stuff pulled out and you're installing it anyways, it's going to be a lot easier to get to. Now, here's the specific wire that you need to tap it into. If you look at a schematic for this, here is how the schematic sits. Here's your body control module, and here are all your circuitries for the interior dimmer switch. This is the one you want, LED backlight dimmer control. Now this is the BCM, which sits behind the passenger side footwell, so you're not going to go all the way there when you can tap it right into the dimmer switch. Pull it out, it comes all the way across, and here is your actual dimmer switch right here. It's on terminal number 5. It's a yellow wire. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was the thicker of all of them. It's a yellow wire though, and that's going to be the one that you're going to tap into. Now this one goes, and it goes in all the other dimmer switches and illumination. Now the way the switch works on the P3 gauge, in order to get that dimmer switch to go on, is once that green wire that's on the box sees a signal of over 12 volts, or excuse me, over 1 volt, it kicks on the dimmer function. So that's why you need that one. Now on other gauges, maybe a traditional analog gauge or something like that, you're going to want this wire right here, the yellow and gray. That's an actual dimmer itself. That's going to be controlled by the actual switch and the variable dimmer itself. But on the P3 gauge, you want this one, the thicker yellow wire. Pull it apart and do that and tap into it. Now if you want to get a view of the way the connector looks, it's going to be, this is it. This will be the face of the connector that goes in the back of the dimmer switch. You want this one over here. I believe it's number 6. If you look down here, it's going to be, no, excuse me, it'll be number 5. Number 5, the yellow wire LED backlight dimmer. So if you're facing the connector, it'll be this one right here. Tap it into that one, and that's what will control the dimmer switch on it. Okay, so like I said, unfortunately I'm not going to do a whole video as to how to put this gauge in. The instructions that come with it are very good. So you just follow those instructions and they will come along just fine, and you'll be able to get it in just fine. It's a Pretty fantastic gauge. It can do a whole bunch of different features. It can even read and clear DTC codes. It has a whole bunch of different functions on it. It works very well. The only other thing that I did want to show is the reason I have that gauge is because I set up as a boost gauge. So once I had the supercharger kit installed, I ran it in as a boost gauge. Now, below underneath there is a grommet that goes through the firewall for the hood latch cables. So once you find that grommet underneath, just go ahead and run a boost line that you can order with them through that same grommet. I ran it up right in here and I teed it off basically on the blow-off valve. Blow-off valve goes right here and it tees off into the what is the PCV system right here. And then I just teed the T. So it just kind of works that way. Not the best way to set it up, I guess, but it does work. Maybe I'll try to clean it up a little bit later, but that's where you can tap into it in order to get an accurate boost reading. Anything else that you want to know, just let me know. If you have any other questions about anything, drop a line, let me know.